and human and institutional capacity on climate change mitigation, adaptation, impact reduction, and early warning. So like we all know, this is the decade of action, a decade where everyone is required to take action, no matter how small it is. These actions that will call for accelerating sustainable solutions to all the world's biggest challenge. So in leaving no one behind and taking action, we welcome you to this event tagged Defending Tomorrow, the climate crisis and threats against land, water body, and environment in post-COVID era. So the aim of this virtual town hall meeting is meant to be interactive, is to ignite the climate action spirit within us so we can individually take sustainable climate actions wherever we find ourselves. So it is going to be interactive. It is going to spur us. It's going to give us ideas on things that we can do individually to ensure that we save the climate and our actions are sustainable as well. So please, as you have joined, kindly follow these simple rules. Please mute your mic when you're not speaking so we can have a free flow and seamless communication. Raise up your hand when you have any questions or you want to speak. Then use the chat button for your comment and questions. We'll curate them, and when it's time for us to present question and answer session, we'll definitely ask your question. Then ensure you can still hear the fire alarm within your headset. So be at alert and aware of your immediate environment. Yes, we have to be safety conscious while also ensuring that we talk about climate actions as well. And as much as possible, stay safe. I would have said use your nose mask, but thank God we're on virtual platform, so definitely we won't be needing a nose mask. But if you are in a crowded environment, make sure you use your nose mask and keep safe. So with all that said, I would like to welcome this the session chairman, Engineer Adebola Bade, to grace us with his opening speech and welcome remarks. Thank you very much. Over to you, sir.
Thank you so much. What do we have next after this? Can you go to the next page? Can I see? Oh, okay. Okay, I think Kingsley, this is your job.
Oh, okay, okay. So, yes, Engineer, like I used to call him my boss, Engineer Bade is an outstanding HSC professional who is currently Operation Safety Leader for Total E&P Nigeria in the area of engineering, construction, project discipline. Also, the HSC and epidemiology study focal points for Total COVID-19 Special Task Force. He has about 24 continuous experience in the oil and gas upstream business, with 6 of these years working with ExxonMobil and 18 years with Total. Engineer Adebola Bade is a senior member of SPE with 22 years continuous membership and has participated in SPE activities in many places in the world. Adebola has won service and professional awards at different levels in SPE and in other professional organizations. Since 1999, when he joined SPE, he has provided selfless service to the community at large. Currently the chairman, SPE Port Harcourt session 2020-21, and the member chair at the SPE Nigerian Council. Is also an avid volunteer of SPE International in different roles. Adebola Bade is a passionate advocate of boy and girl child education and development. He is involved in STEM, SDG 2030, event coordination, and speaks in several organizations all over the world. So in the comment section, can we all say welcome? Welcome. So as he graces us with his welcome remarks. Thank you very much as you all listen.
Thank you so much, Kingsley. Even though in the beginning you mispronounced my name, please don't pronounce the names of our panelists very, very well. It's very important, you know. They're all over the world, so you have to let you pronounce them. So thank you, everyone. You're welcome from our panelists to the directors of SP Section 103, to all our members, non-members also alike, ladies and gentlemen. So I'm very glad that we're having this today. Sometimes mid last year, I remember Kingsley also and Anita and two other people, they approached me on the SDG. In fact, Kingsley and Anita on their own rights, they preach, they preach, if I will use that word, they preach sustainable development in schools just on their own. So I got to meet them and I said, this is a beautiful thing here, but we can bring it on a bigger platform and see where we can take it. Of course, SDG is a focused kind of campaign. So, of course, we have SDG, 17 of them, the Student Development Goals of the UN. Why I really like the SDG is because of how structured it is. If you look at it, you see they say it has 169 targets they are trying to solve, 169, and then 3,039 events, imagine, on the website, and 1,267 publications, and then 5,417 actions. Actions is incredible. So we have a lot of works in our hands, and that is why I've asked that we have top panelists to really do justice to this. The objective of SDG for people, for other people, of course, you will know more about it, is to end the poverty, is also to protect the planet and ensure people enjoy peace and equity and prosperity by year 2030. So that is my fear. When they say 2030, I think 2030 is too near, just within 10 years. But anyway, everybody have to do their part, you know. And we have done a lot of, in fact, events, up to several events that is focused on the SDG. We are focused on the SDG 5, which is the gender equality. We have women that have been doing a lot of events on this. We have had the SDG 7, which is affordable and clean energy, and also SDG 12, which is responsible consumption and production. In fact, we have the plastic recycling and a lot of things on how we have to eat right. There's a lot that we have done on this within this last 8 months. And then, of course, this one, the SDG 13, which we are ending with, and then we have to see, maybe we'll restart again for those 4 focused on. SDG 13 is climate action, which we are focusing on today. So within this program also, we have a video challenge that we threw out to our members to do a 59 seconds video of how the climate is affecting, the climate change is actually affecting us. And just based on this also, there was a clause there that your video must be able to, a 4 to 12-year-old should be able to understand. So you have to do maybe like a cartoon, you know, children understand. So you have to come to the basics, because I think we are speaking too much English at times in student development propagation. So I think we need to come to the basics so that the common man in the street also can understand in terms of our awareness. So, and we have top 5 winners in this. And in the course of this presentation or the event also, I think they will show some of the video and you will see maybe people start understanding it. And we have prizes for them also. So the topic is apt. The climate crisis, threats against land, water bodies, and environment in the post-COVID-19 era. So when we put COVID-19 again, you can see the paradigm change in that. And you can see we are not just talking about climate change now. Now we are saying in the post-COVID. So that is another thing I feel our panelists is going to let us understand better. What is the future like before COVID and then after COVID? What are we looking at? So, and I really thank the Committee of Sustainable Development Goals for selecting. It blew my mind actually, selecting quite competent, I don't know, global kind of panelists and speakers. It actually blew my mind, to be sincere, and I'm very, very happy for this. I'm very sure they're going to do justice to this topic, and then, of course, we'll be able to see some recommendations at the end of this. So I checked most of their profiles and not only, and some of them also on LinkedIn. So I'll be following everyone from now, so that we'll continue discussion on social media, so to speak. I think, let me just give a quick comment. For people that will be asking questions in these events, please put a Q in the comments just immediately we start before your questions. It's very easy for our teams to collate your questions. If it's comments, you just put C as a prefix. So for questions, put a Q, and then for comments, your prefix will be C. It makes our team, our engagement team, to quickly sort them out for the panelists when needed. So we're also on YouTube Live. They will put the link there. So in case also you want to send it to your loved ones to watch you on YouTube, it's fine. So I think, let me not bore you further. I just have to declare this event open. And this is on behalf of the directors of SPE Section 103, our members, our young professionals, our indefatigable students from 12 universities in Southeast, South Nigeria, and also in Cameroon. I say you should enjoy, and let's start. Thank you very much. Over to you, Kingsley.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you for your words of advice and encouragement, and also for giving us a good idea of what the event is all about. So I'll bring on stage, I'll bring on the platform now, our moderator for the day. He goes by Engineer Max. So he will do the introduction of the guests and speakers as well. So Engineer Max, if you can hear me, please, the floor is yours.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Perfect. Loud and clear.
So welcome everyone. Our SC have already set the ball rolling. Without wasting much time, we will be introducing our keynote speakers, who they are, and the values they have for us on the table. So our first keynote speaker will be Dr. Priscilla Achakpe. Dr. Priscilla Achakpe is a seasoned professional when you talk about environmental concern. She is a Nigerian, but she has had a lot of engagement in Niger, Togo, Burkina Faso, Tunisia, and the USA. She has over 20 years experience in the development work, gender issues, research and documentation, as well as a resource mobilization, monitoring and evaluation, conflict intervention, peace building, negotiations, labors, and what have you. So currently, she's founder and global president of Women Environmental Program, right? And okay, an observer status to the United Nations Environmental Program, UNEP, and United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. Organizing partner women major group representing Africa on the 2030 agenda as UN processes. Priscilla has held many positions at national and international levels and is a member of different development bodies across the globe. She is also a recipient of several awards and a member of different professional association network. She is an Ashaka Fellow and named an Eco Hero by Germany Deutsche Welle. That's a media outfit, and by Nigerian Channels Television. In 2015, she was described as one of the 13 formidable women leading in the fight against climate crisis, along with several diplomas. She holds a PhD in economics from the University of Business Engineering and Management, Bosnia-Herzegovina. I'm sure when you see somebody with a CV like this, you have no option than to be attentive, to listen, so that you can get the best out of it. We will give the floor to her Then when we have 20 minutes for Doc. Doc, you are welcome.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry, I just put my face on for you people to see. The network where I am is very bad and it's fluctuating. So if I decide to put on the video, it might be on. So I hope you will understand the situation where we are in Nigeria, where the internet facilities is very bad. So permit me to put off the video so that at least you can hear my voice and put the face to the voice. Is that okay?
Perfect. You're welcome, ma.
Thank you very much. Let me start by saying that it is my honor and a pleasure to be with you at this town hall meeting and to deliver a keynote address with a team defending tomorrow the climate crisis and threats against lands, water bodies, and environment in post-COVID era. Indeed, when I heard about town hall meeting from a typical NGO setting, it is where you go to the community and you mobilize them in a very physical form where you are talking to them. And so I was also excited thinking that I'm going to meet with some community people to discuss with them one-on-one and to hear their voices. But of course, COVID-19 has changed the narratives. And the narratives is this meetings that we're having. So that is what COVID-19 has done to us. But of course, it has made a lot of us to go digital. A lot of people who were not IT compliant are now forced to become IT compliant. So this is a very good part of the COVID-19, what COVID-19 has brought to the world and indeed to some of us that are not compliant with IT. Having said that, I want to start my presentation with a quote, which is the Society for Petroleum Engineers have provided. And when I read that quote, I was very inspired. It says, climate change is not on pause once the global economy begins to recover from the pandemic. Emissions are expected to return to higher levels. And so I looked at that and I said, yes, climate change is indeed not on pause. And climate change is indeed a time bomb. Of course, compared to what COVID-19 has brought on board, we really need to begin to look at the issues of climate change. Now, let's look at it from the perspective of the impact of climate change on countries. I decided to start my keynote with a quote from, as I said, to jot our minds back to the stark reality that the 6% reduction in the global emission, which SPE has quoted, is as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, which halted local and international travels and compliance with lockdowns across the world to contain the spread of violence. Of the virus. However, this has, however, shown that we humans who cause the increased rise in emissions are also responsible for its reduction and in the shortest possible time frame if we all commit to it. I am one of the culprits, and I have my friend Nimo Basi, who were always competing when it comes to travel and going for conferences internationally. Now COVID-19 has made us to stop that. The impact of COVID-19 has been felt globally and in several ways, both on the humans, environment, and the climate. The pandemic has highlighted that the provision of safe water, sanitation, and hygienic conditions essential for protecting human health during all infectious diseases outbreaks, according to the World Health Organization 2020. It is clear that water quality affected by microbiological and chemical contaminants, water resources management, ecosystem health, and food safety are vitally important to global public health. It recognizes that managing the linkages between water quality and food security and the application of sound principles of adequate waste management, environmental sanitation, hygiene in markets and food handling Personal hygiene and established food safety practices will reduce the likelihood of harmful pathogens from threatening the safety of the food supply. It also highlighted the adoption of preventive measures to pollutants in water through sustainable land and water management for agricultural production as key to shifting the focus towards preventing rather than responding to foodborne contamination as source. At the peak of the lockdown around July 2020, satellite images showing a dramatic drops in air pollution in coronavirus hotspots around the globe were circulated widely on social media, offering a silver lining to an otherwise very dark story. But they were also a graphic reminder of the climate crisis that will continue after the pandemic. As the lockdowns are lifted and life returns to what it was once, so too is the pollution that beclouds the skies, and with it, the greenhouse gas emissions, gases that fuel global warming. In fact, the rebound could be even worse, except the world's heaviest polluters take a turn for the better. Of the 20 countries causing the highest emissions in the world, only 1%, South Africa, contributes a total of 1% of global emissions from Africa, according to the 2020 Union of Concerned Scientists data, Earth Systems Science Data 11 and 2019. Environmentalists and science and been warning that poorer countries with very low carbon footprints are bearing the brunt of carbon dioxide emissions by the wealthy countries worldwide. And this is from the Global Injustice Climate Climate Crisis. Africa, as the least of the countries causing global emission, is most impacted by its effects, especially in the area of food insecurity and nutrients deficit. This is further buttressed by the State of Africa Climate Report 2019 by the World Meteorological Organization, which informed that 2019 specifically, a precursor to 2020 COVID-19, global shocks and Africa experienced the worst of global warming with high impact events that resulted to loss and damage to vital aspects of communities and populations. Of such events was the devastation resulting from the tropical cyclone Idai. The report also stated that as a result of global warming, drought-prone sub-Saharan African countries have experienced the number of undernourished people increasing by 45.6% since 2012, according to the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations. The poor are highly affected by extreme weather and climate events and are often overrepresented in the number of individuals displaced by these events. The socio-economic growth gained since the adoption of the Sustainable Development Goals through efforts of government, businesses, and the civil society was almost lost due to the pandemic, further exacerbating the sufferings of the most affected by global warming. This dual salient of global warming and COVID-19 combined forces to further push back efforts and rid poor countries and communities and individuals of gains both in adaptation and mitigation efforts. Now let's look at the efforts aimed at containing the impact of COVID-19. Indeed, as the Minister of Environment for State will say, COVID-19 has made us to know that by now we have to live with the stability that our biodiversity is important. And the earlier we begin to look at our biodiversity is very important. Part of the efforts to continue in the front line of fighting both the global warming effects on land, water bodies, and environment, and the post-COVID recovery is to ensure that socioeconomic growth. This means ensuring populations that are most dependent on the three identified areas must be included in all socioeconomic efforts. There is a need to map out most affected areas as well as most affected populations for a more coordinated approach according to the Meteorological Organization, which informed that one promising approach throughout the continent to reducing the impacts of poverty is by promoting socioeconomic growth in the agricultural sector. In this sector, which employs 60% of African population and indeed Nigeria, value addition techniques using efficient and clean energy sources are reported to be capable of reducing poverty 2 to 4 times faster than growth in any other sector. Solar-powered efficient micro-irrigation, for example, is increasing farm level incomes by 5 to 10 times, improving yields by up to 300% and reducing water usage by up to 90%, while at the same time offsetting carbon emissions by generating up to 250 kilowatts of clean energy. The Nigeria's nationally determined contribution is on delivery of direct development benefits and sustainable development growth, as well as improving individual well-being, which includes a healthy environment, land and water bodies inclusive. Furthermore, by not undertaking these measures, Nigeria would incur significant adaptation costs for exacerbated climate change. As indicated in His Excellency, President Muhammadu Buhari's inaugural speech in 2015, he said that Nigeria is committed to tackling climate change. Also, on the 11th July 2020, at the 74th session of the United Nations General Assembly, he announced a massive reforestation plan of planting 25 million trees, which is currently being implemented by different stakeholders, governments, CSOs, private sectors, communities, etc., at the federal, state, and local governments level. Let me digress by stating that the NDCs that were approved in 2015 has now, the ministry, or is rather is going under review. And apart from the 5 sectors that were included, 2 more sectors have been added to it. And this is as a result of the fact that a lot of people feel, Nigerians feel that the NDCs that Nigeria submitted in 2015 did not capture most of the issues. For instance, we didn't have water and wastewater management in the 5 thematic areas that Nigeria had submitted. But as the review is going on, and which is almost concluded, these two thematic areas have been included in that. Equally, while many countries are still focusing on the past where more stimulus funds are going to fossil fuels than to clean energy, there are promising examples of green recovery in Nigeria, the largest oil and gas producer in Africa. The nation is taking steps towards a sustainable economic green recovery by providing stimulus funding for cleaner energy, supporting women-owned businesses. Nigeria has an opportunity to build a more inclusive, equitable, and sustainable economy. To achieve the 45 emissions reduction of Nigeria's commitment to the Paris Agreement via the nationally determined contributions, Nigeria successfully issued first and second green bonds, which were indeed oversubscribed. The proceeds of the green bonds through the private sector, Nigeria is energizing education program to provide sustainable and clean energy power supply to 37 federal universities and 7 university teaching hospitals across Nigeria. The project includes the provision of an independent power plant, upgrading existing distribution infrastructure, street lighting to improve security within the university's campuses, as well as the development of a world-class training center on renewable energy for each universities. And you will agree with me that some of the universities, we have very good stories about how they're making use of this. For instance, the Federal University of Agriculture in Makurdi, there have been testimonies that the solar powered project that Nigeria has submitted, that the Nigeria is implementing there, is very important and has empowered a lot of the students that are there. Now, having said much about what the government and the impact of COVID-19 and what Nigerian government is doing, I just want to provide an insight into the work of the Women Environmental Program, because I am the global president of the Women Environmental Program and as the founder, as has been introduced. And for us at WEB, we have done quite a lot. Women Environmental Program is a regional organization with offices in Burkina Faso, Niger, Togo, Tunisia, and Nigeria as the headquarters. We also have an office in US, in New York precisely. Now, WEP emerged in 1997 in Kaduna State, Nigeria, as a non-governmental organization by a group of grassroots women in response to the environmental pollution caused by industries in Kaduna State over the years. And indeed, this was from the textile industries, including the NLPC, who were discharging their influence directly into the environment. She has expanded since the 1997, WEP has expanded her interventions to environmental issues such as peace and other issues such as peace and security, climate change, and governance. WEP envisions a world where the lives of women and youth are positively transformed. WEP collaborates with the government and her institutions, agencies, private sector, academia, and other stakeholders at all levels to deliver in fulfillment of her vision and mission of closing the gap on gender mainstreaming into policies and governance issues. In her efforts to contribute towards curbing both the effects of COVID-19 and global warming impacts in Nigeria and around the globe, WEP has been involving all stakeholders at all levels to support the implementation of the Nigerian NDCs and other socioeconomic efforts to pull our most vulnerable communities and people out of poverty. In such an effort, Women Environmental Program, in partnership with the Federal Minister of Environment, developed the first National Action Plan on Gender and Climate Change, which was approved by the Federal Executive Council, FIC, on 12th August 2020. The action plan has 5 focal areas, viz. Agriculture, forestry and land use, food security and health, energy and transport, waste management, and water and sanitation, along with an implementation plan that can be adopted by all stakeholders. This is particularly important because women constitute a large percentage of the world's poor and should be specifically targeted if we are to defend their tomorrow. Thank you for that, team, SPE. As about half of the women are active in agriculture, about 60% as well. Equally, WEB carried out a survey on assessing the impact of COVID-19 on gender, a focus on the economic, social, and psychological impact on women in 2020. The study revealed that gender and sex differences have had a profound impact on how COVID-19 impacts women, respond to and recover from it. The findings of the assessment indicates many effects of the pandemic on women-related vulnerability that has added to the pre-existing economic vulnerabilities of women in Nigeria, which includes loss of means of livelihood, support, and income, which has had severe economic impact for women in Nigeria. In conclusion, COVID-19 has brought to us the realization that whether rich or poor countries, there is no barrier to how it affects the people. Therefore, there is no limit to contributing the solution of this global pandemic that cannot be tackled by just one country, but requires collective efforts using a gender lens perspective. And I heard Bada talked about gender issues, inclusivity, which I found very interesting. May I conclude by congratulating the SPE Port Harcourt section for highlighting such an important nexus between global warming and COVID-19 as a focus for this town hall meeting and the topic defending tomorrow, the climate crisis and threats against land, water bodies and environment in post-COVID-19 era as a critical focus to draw global attention and push for local support. Our organization, Women Environmental Program, look forward to a robust partnership and collaboration with the Society for Petroleum Engineers in the near future. I will end with a quote. I started with a quote, so I want to end with a quote as well. No one saw COVID-19 coming. With global warming, there is a catastrophe of equal or greater magnitude on the horizon that we can still do something about. This quote is from Stephen Damister, co-head of responsible investment at Man Group, and he said this in March 2020. I thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, madam. Thank you, Doc, for nailing it. We really appreciate. Can we please put our hands together? Just on mute. I think it was a wonderful presentation. So, madam, while you stay tuned, we would like to listen to our next presenter, because the questions are going to fall out. And I'm sure a lot of persons are already putting their pens together. The question will come in, so still give us some of your time. Yeah, we know you're a very busy person, so just give us some of your time. Yeah.
I'm here.
So the questions will be coming in. Yeah, okay. So quickly we'll be inviting our next keynote speaker. She's no other person than Dr. Pedi Obani. Pedi Obani is an assistant professor of law, Faculty of Management, Law and Science and Social Science at the University of Bradford. She's also an affiliate member of African Academy of Science and a visiting research fellow in water security policy governance at the School of Politics and International Study, University of Leeds. She has over a decade of research, project management, and capacity building experience in the fields of climate change, sustainable water and natural resources management, and gender inclusiveness, with several high-impact academic publications. She was recently involved in a cross-country study of links between climate change and the stranding of hydrocarbon assets in Africa, conducting in-country engagements with key stakeholders in energy sector in Nigeria, Zambia, Ghana, and among other countries. The findings of the study have been published in the United Nations University Institute of Natural Resources in Africa. And you can see the discussion paper underlined. Yeah. So Dr. Obani holds membership of several professional associations. Furthermore, she's actively involved in regional and international civil society networks for environment, sustainability, social justice, and gender equality. We brought in gender equality proponents. I'm sure, Dr. Obani, you have the floor and you do justice as a keynote speaker. You're welcome.
Thank you very much for the warm introduction. Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Excellent. Thank you. So I'd like to share my screen. I think I have the rights to do that. So I'll try to see that it works. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Right.
Excellent. Thank you. So hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I'm happy to be here. Thank you, SPE, for the invitation. And I mean, listening to Dr. Achakpa and listening to Badi as well, and everyone who's spoken so far today, it's been really exciting for me for different reasons. First of all, because I grew up in Port Harcourt. I grew up very closely attached to the oil and gas industry. And a few years later, you know, when I became interested in environment, it almost seemed like there was a contradiction. You know, but over the years, I've come to see that there's actually a meeting point, and this program exemplifies that meeting point, where it's the petroleum industry speaking to us about climate change. Meanwhile, in very many fora, the petroleum industry is seen as one of the main problems when we think about climate change. So I'm really happy to be here, and I'm hoping that over the next few minutes, we will see that really the oil and gas industry, petroleum, has a role to play in addressing climate change, in defending tomorrow, you know, in protecting the environment, and can actually reinvent itself, you know, as a solution to the problem that currently exists. Within that context, I'm happy to deliver this keynote presentation. I'll be looking at how does this connection work between climate change and COVID-19, because that's what we're talking about today. And then within that context, what can we do as individuals to ensure that we contribute to the solution, you know, and not just whine about the problem of climate change and COVID-19. So to open, I'd like to ask a question, and I'll be happy for us to, I'm not sure, maybe the moderators can help me here, but people can maybe give responses in the chat box. And if you can just let me know what the responses are, just in case I'm not able to monitor the chat box properly. So the question is, what is the most important function of a building structure? And this question is for everybody who's here today. What would you consider as the most important function of a building? And I want you to think about this in the context of our conversation today. So in the context of COVID-19, in the context of climate change, and then just generally speaking, why would you consider a building as being important, if at all? So it's over to you. Let's say that I'm a teacher, right? So we have a penchant for asking questions to people. So forgive me for asking you this question, but I'd like to hear from you, really. Shelter, thank you. Shelter, Okay, so I think we have two responses. Shelter, thank you very much for both responses. Protection, thank you. Protection, thank you very much. Accommodate people, shelter, protection, thank you very much. So I think we already see a narrative, you know, running through the responses. Buildings are important because they provide shelter, you know, they provide protection, they provide accommodation to people. Shelter again, yes. And I mean, for me, I also think it's the same thing. It's shelter, it's protection, it's defending, it's a line of defense against the elements. So when we think about climate change, very often we talk about extreme weather events, we talk about disasters. And when we have buildings that are properly designed with the right materials, well located and all that, those buildings can actually offer some form of protection, you know, some form of defense against the elements, against the extreme weather events. So that is on the one hand. On the other hand, within the context of COVID-19, again, buildings can provide some level of protection, some level of defense. I mean, a lot of us have experienced lockdowns at different levels. And what it means is that in thinking about defending tomorrow, we're essentially supposed to be thinking about building structures, building institutions, building processes that can offer a level of protection against extreme weather events that may come from climate change, but also against infection from COVID-19 and other diseases that we may be exposed to. So thanks a lot to everyone who responded to that opening reflection question. Now, within the context of our conversation, Engineer Bade had kindly told us about SDG 13 and the activities of the SPE in relation to that. So SDG 13, as also Dr. Achakwa's presentation covered, is about climate action. It's essentially about taking urgent action to address climate change and its impacts. Within the context of the SDGs, there are 5 targets for SDG 13, and there are 8 indicators. I've put down here 2 targets that I think are very directly related to what we can do as individuals. So target 13.1 is about strengthening resilience and adaptive capacity to climate-related hazards and natural disasters. So in that context, we can actually ensure that our buildings, our processes as organizations are actually resilient and are adapted to ensure that the impacts of climate change are mitigated or reduced. Another target that I think is important within the context of our conversation today is about improving education, awareness raising, and human and institutional capacity on climate change mitigation, adaptation, impact reduction, and early warning. Again, that is very closely related to what we're doing here today. Now, having said that, I would like us to also remember that SDG 13, even though it speaks to climate action, which is essentially environmental, is more than the environment. If we think about climate change, having listened to the first keynote speaker, we'll recall that climate change has implications for gender. It has implications for energy. It has implications for how we consume and produce. It has implications for practically every aspect of our lives. So it then means that climate action is not only for those who may have an interest in the environment. No, it is essentially a question of our survival as humans. Is a question of our survival as business owners, or survival of businesses, survival of processes, and all of this has to be well appreciated in order to understand the importance of taking action for climate change. Now, in terms of building a solid foundation for our conversation today, I'd like us to think about the connections between climate change and COVID-19. And one thing that I think stands out is that there are very many parallels between these 2 crises. I call them converging crises. Before COVID came, we were already grappling with climate change, and now we have these 2 crises to deal with. First of all, both climate change and COVID-19 are very closely linked to human action as causal factors. So depending on who you speak to, you will find that climate change is attributed heavily to human actions or anthropogenic factors. Similarly, COVID-19 is also linked to human actions. So in the end, we as humans are at the center of the problems we experience today. It then means that we have a huge responsibility to also choose to be intentional about being part of the solutions. Secondly, denial is one parallel that exists. Now, both climate change, if we look at the history of climate change and we look at the history of COVID-19, which is more recent than climate change, we will find that there have been very many instances of denial. Countries coming to say, oh, we do not have any cases of COVID-19 here, whereas, they actually had cases of COVID-19. Same thing happening at different levels, countries, individuals, families, institutions, companies, and all of that. So denial has been there. Just as with climate change, we had people denying that the climate crisis even was happening. Although now it is more difficult for people to deny that there's climate change. The question now is more about what's causing it, or the controversy is very often about what's causing it or what do we do about it. Another parallel that exists is a victimization of the order. And very often it is vulnerable people who have been victimized. Within the context of climate change and very many environmental problems, it is very often poor people who are pointed to as a cause of the problem. Oh, it is because these poor people are polluting the environment. It is because they do not know how to clean up. It is because they are not doing this, they are not doing that. We do not often look at the actions of the strong, the actions of the rich nations, rich countries, rich people, rich companies. We very often push the blame, push the buck to the poor people, to the vulnerable people, who very often are really not the cause of the problem, but experience the problem even more severely than others do. Again, with COVID-19, it's been very similar. Very often, fingers are pointed at certain countries as a cause of the problem, certain sectors as part of the problem, but not looking at it holistically as to how each and every one of us has contributed to the problem. Another parallel that exists is misinformation. So again, there was a lot of misinformation about climate change as we're experiencing with COVID-19 today. How many people are infected? We do not know. We do not trust the figures. There's misinformation. Sometimes there's concealment of information. All of these are some similarities between the experiences with climate change and the experiences with COVID-19. The last two parallels I would like to talk about are differentiated impacts. And by this, I mean that climate change affects people differently. So while a country, a state, a region might be experiencing climate change, the impacts would be different for individuals within that state. And very often it will depend on the level of resilience of those individuals or systems, the kinds of coping capacities that they have. The same thing with COVID-19. We already know that people with underlying health conditions very often experience COVID-19 differently from those without underlying health conditions. Again, regulation. And by this, I mean the fact that both for COVID-19 and climate change, we see that regulation plays an important role in addressing the problem. So those are some of the similarities we can think about, or the connections between climate change and COVID-19. Again, within the context of the similarities or the connection, we know that green recovery from COVID-19 is an important element of addressing climate change going forward. Now, what are the pillars? And by this, I mean, what are the emerging environmental threats? One of them is that climate change, the root causes of climate change are also linked to increased risk of pandemic. So for instance, when we think about climate change and we think about how human actions has led to climate change, has led to droughts, has led to desertification and other environmental problems, we find that the origins of pandemics are also linked to these actions by humans. So that's related to what I spoke about in the previous slide. Secondly, is that there's a risk of infection among populations without access to basic services such as water, sanitation, healthcare, and other similar basic services. Thirdly, we find that there's an increased risk of mortality amongst populations that are exposed to air pollution. So this means that air pollution, which again is linked to climate change, also has implications for COVID. Again, environmental degradation through poor handling of wastewater, medical waste is likely to be on the increase as a result of COVID. Finally, during this pandemic, there has been a reduced focus on climate action. So again, within that context, this event by SPE is most welcome because it is refocusing our attention on something really important. Even though we're grappling with the pandemic, there's also need for us to think about climate action and how to protect the environment further. Now, I've thought about three scenarios in terms of what these connections between COVID and climate are and how this could affect the environment. And again, how this could affect everyone here within the petroleum industry or within the oil and gas sector. Now, those three scenarios I thought about one, a total collapse, two, full recovery, and three, greener growth. Within the context of a total collapse, actions of COVID-19 and climate change could lead to environmental degradation. And in fact, a total breakdown of ecosystem services as a result of the convergence. So that is one, and that is the total collapse scenario. We could also have a collapse of the economy as a result of the lockdowns, as a result of the extreme events from climate change, all of this coming together and leading to a collapse of the economy. Thirdly, we could have weaker demand for oil and gas. I don't know what Engineer Bade thinks about this, but I think this is something that could actually be a possibility if there's a total collapse of environmental and economic systems as a result of climate change and COVID-19 coming together. So that is total collapse, a possible scenario. Now, a second scenario we could conceive of is, if everything goes well, everybody gets vaccinated, the infection is prevented, and then climate change is brought to a halt by some miracle, and we do not have global warming to think about anymore, then we may actually have a full recovery under which environmental degradation continues at the same rate as expected, or at the same rate as expected, if the pandemic had not occurred. Because the truth about it is climate change is not the only environmental problem that we have. So environmental problems continue, but not at an alarming rate. And secondly, there's a strong rebound of the economy, because all these interventions are working. And thirdly, oil demand peaks, because we know that it will peak at some point and possibly decline. So it peaks at some point and then it declines, but it doesn't peak, it doesn't decline in a way that we're uncomfortable with, because we're prepared, we're able to respond within our systems and all of that. So that's full recovery. Now, another possible scenario is greener growth. Now, within the context of greener growth, that is when we now think about having a recovery from COVID-19 that takes into consideration climate change, that takes into consideration the need for environmental action. So within that context, this integration of environmental concerns in plans for recovery, in plans for addressing the pandemic, in plans for mitigating climate change, or in plans for climate action actually supports environmental sustainability. So that is one possibility for greener growth. And within that context, again, because we're integrating the environment in everything we do, we then find that economic growth is sustained and it is indeed sustainable. So that is a possibility. But at the same time, even within the greener growth scenario, there is likely to be weaker demand for oil and gas. I know that there are some students here, who are interested in the oil sector and all that. This is not to make you alarmed, but this is just to bring to of the reality. It's more or less a reality check. There's likely to be weaker demand for oil and gas, either in the very near future or in the far future, whatever that means. But essentially, it is something that is likely to happen, however we look at it, in whatever scenario we conceive of, in a post-COVID era. So what do we do? How do we address this? And I've called the slide Oil and Gas Outlook. And one of them is that COVID-19 compounds the challenges facing oil and gas markets, because like I mentioned before, there's already likely to be weak demand for oil and gas anyway in the future. But what happens is with COVID-19, this problem becomes even more complex, even more compounded, and it's something to deal with. Secondly, there's likely to be stranded assets as a result of all these challenges of climate change and COVID-19. It then means that going forward, people are likely to be constrained to the extent, or the extent to which investments in oil and gas remain attractive would likely be reduced, as a result of both climate change and COVID-19. Because we know with COVID-19, for instance, mobility is less, industrial activities have been impacted during the lockdowns and all that. Although there's recovery, chances are that even with the recovery, the ways of doing business will change. So that could still lead to some kind of drop in demand, and possible oversupply in some context. So these are all things to think about in terms of the outlook for oil and gas. Now, the outcomes, the real impacts will depend on a number of things. And I think one of the things that the real impacts will depend on will be to what extent COVID-19 infection prevention measures are successful. It would also depend on the strategies that are put in place to address the direct and proximate impact of the pandemic on economic growth. And thirdly, it will depend on the extent to which transitions in the energy sector are both green and just. And I've put in green and just here because ultimately, the way in which climate change affects the environment and indeed affects people, and the way in which even the energy sector affects the environment and people, and the way in which COVID-19 affects the environment and people is all about how governance systems integrate environmental sustainability in the mix. So if the energy sector wishes to remain relevant in a post-COVID era, it then means that it needs to think about how to make its operations how to reduce its environmental impact footprints as much as possible. So the environmental footprints of the operations need to be reduced to the barest minimum, and that is about the greening. And by saying greening, it's not just about greenwashing, but it's about actually taking steps to ensure that the impact on the environment is minimum, is reduced to the barest minimum level. And there's also the importance of ensuring that there is justice And this justice is from the perspective of not just the host communities, but also from the perspective of the consumers. It's also from the perspective of the countries that are the host countries. It's also from the perspective of the exporters and then the importers. So all of this has to be taken into consideration. It has implications not only for how we can defend ourselves against the pandemic and against environmental problems in the future, but it also has implications for how the sector or the oil and gas sector or industry, however you call it, remains relevant in the post-COVID era. So within that context, I want us to think about this conversations around SDG 13 and around action in post-COVID era, not just as a service to the community, not as a service to the wider public, but also as a service to ourselves. Because it is only if it's only by reinventing itself to promote both environmental sustainability and human security within the context of preventing infections, within the context of ensuring the safety of people, that the sector or the industry can remain relevant. So what do we do in terms of ensuring this relevance? And I've called it a roof over everyone's head. So how do we have a more or less a win-win solution that not only protects the environment, not only protects people from infection in a post-COVID era, but also ensures that the industry remains profitable, for its stakeholders? One of them is to think about the multiple uses of oil and gas in various contexts. So the industry or oil and gas, and all of us have to think about how does oil and gas contribute to a low carbon future? Is there room for that contribution to be made? How can it happen? Clearly, business as usual will not work. So what will work? Can we repurpose the assets that the oil and gas industry has to other uses that ensure a low carbon future, or at least contribute to a low carbon future? That is something to think about. The industry has existed for so long and has so many assets at its disposal. But the question becomes, how can these assets be repurposed to ensure that we contribute to sustainability from the angle of the environment, from the angle of society, and also from the angle of the economy? So that's something to think about. And if we're able to achieve that, then we'll be able to have a roof over everyone's head in the context of actually meeting the competing needs of everyone. Of course, whether that's even possible, it's a question for another day, but at least that's something we can strive for. It's something we can look forward to. It's something we can challenge ourselves to contribute to. And within that context, I've said we also have to think about inclusive development. So I know there's a lot of talk about sustainable development, and that is also closely related to inclusive development. Even the first keynote speaker spoke about inclusiveness. But they also spoke about inclusiveness. So how do we ensure that in whatever we do, there's a contribution to inclusive development? Because it is only when we're able to achieve inclusive development that we can actually ensure that we remain relevant in the future in a post-COVID era. And within that context of inclusive development, we have to think about social inclusion. And essentially, social inclusion would be about ensuring that the basic needs of people are met. It would be about ensuring that human security is protected. We also have to think about relational inclusion, which is about closing the gap between those who have and those who do not have. So how does the industry, how do our actions contribute to reducing that gap, reducing exclusion, reducing deprivation, reducing vulnerability and marginalization? That is we ensure that our actions and our inactions do not interfere with the balance of ecosystem. So those are things to think about in terms of ensuring that in a post-COVID era, we even have a post-COVID era to look forward to. I think that's some fact that the future is not a given. Our actions today actually determine whether we have a future to think about, to talk about, to live in. So these are all things to consider. And we cannot take it for granted that tomorrow is assured. No, it is not assured. It is only what we do today. And it is only if we think about it in terms of social inclusion, relational inclusion, and ecological inclusion that we can even start thinking about the possibility of a future and being in that future in a way that is meaningful to achieving our aspirations as individuals and as organizations. Yeah. So now to the closing call for action, and I've called it GAP. What do we do? Individuals, what do we do as researchers, whoever we are, wherever we find ourselves, how can we contribute to ensuring that tomorrow is defended? Tomorrow is maybe not assured, but at least is not put at too much risk. And is it tomorrow that we can look forward to with enthusiasm? And I think one of them is that we have to think about greening our operations and the value chain. Wherever we are, whatever we do, we have to think about to what extent we can actually reduce emissions from the way we live our lives, from the way we carry out our business. So that is one thing to think about. Secondly, we have to think about adapting. And this becomes even more important, not only within the context of climate change adaptation, which is about ensuring that we protect systems, people, and processes as much as possible from the impact of climate change. So it's not just adaptation in that sense. We also have to think about adaptation now, because of COVID, we have to think about adaptation within the context of COVID-19 and how to reduce person-to-person contacts and infection prevention and control within that context. But I would like to sound a word of caution, especially to the industry. Now, a lot of the conversations are about automation. We've seen that working from home is possible. We've seen that remote working is possible. And chances are that there was some movement towards automation, more movement towards automation, because that was something already been happening already, especially in mining and some other sectors. But I think we also have to think about what this will mean for the people in the industry. So if we're going more towards automation, what does this mean for people's livelihoods? Will jobs be lost? How can people be protected? Because essentially, if we move towards automation in a way that does not protect the well-being of the workers in that industry, that also has negative implications for all of us, even for the businesses. So in saying adapting workstations, service delivery models, supply chains, and operations to minimize emissions and physical interactions between people and to minimize disruptions, we also have to think about doing it in a way that is fair, in a way that is just, in a way that is equitable. So that is another call for action. And a final call for action, I would say, is we have to prioritize the protection of the environment in the new normal. Again, linked to the first keynote, it is not just about recovering the economy from the effects of the pandemic. No, it is also about ensuring that we recover the economy without jeopardizing environmental sustainability. And within this context, it is also important to think about human rights. So the protection of the environment, not only for the protection of the environment by itself or in itself as an important objective, but also thinking about the implications for humans in this environment or whichever environment we think about, and how we can ensure that human rights are protected and are actually safe, from negative impacts of recovery activities. So with this, my final call for action and the message I'd like to leave you with is GAP. Simply, let's think about how to green operations. Let's think about how to adapt and adapt in a way that minimizes emissions, minimizes physical interactions between people because of COVID-19, but also minimizes disruptions to processes, to institutions and our ways of living generally. Of course, if the disruptions are important in order to reduce climate change or to reduce emissions, I'm all for it. And finally, we have to think about how to prioritize the environment and ensure that pursuing economic recovery, pursuing social development does not compromise the environment and does not jeopardize human rights even further. So in terms of the students who are here and thinking about future research, I think these are viable research areas to look into. And in terms of members of the industry and other stakeholders here, however, wherever we find ourselves, I think these are all important objectives to try and adapt to wherever we find ourselves. So with this, I would say thank you, Mecca, and I've come to the end of my presentation.
Doc, thank you. Even though we overshot our time, we really appreciate the delivery.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Yeah, it's okay. It's okay. We're learning. when a professor is speaking, who else will say anything? We'll listen. Yeah, thank you for the presentation. So within the next few minutes, you'll be taking some questions from the audience, and I'm sure Dr. Achakpa is still on the line with us.
Yes.
So that we can, so we can handle the question session together, and also expect our panelists to be on alert, because hereafter we will have the panel sessions in which some questions will be put across to you, and we expect responses. Yeah. So any question from the audience? If you have any question, can you please flag? Okay. One of the questions. Can you go ahead, please? So there is so question. During Dr. Ubani's presentation, in one of our slides, we have a risk of infection without access to basic services such as water. He said the question is, how can lack of access to water cause infection or pose a risk of infection to people? Does lack of water in the body cause any known infection other than dehydration and loss of hemostasis, which aren't infectious, or lack of water? I'm sure doctor understands where he's going to.
Okay, thank you very much for the question. Maybe I should start by saying this is petty PhD. I'm not a medical doctor, so let's have that clearly stated. Yeah, but thanks for the question. If I can answer, briefly, and based on, now I'm speaking as someone who's closely connected with water and sanitation. The question about whether that slide, the risk of infection that I put in that slide, was within the context of COVID-19. Now, we know that one of the main barriers, for this pandemic and for very many other diseases is hand washing. It's that simple. So within that context alone, we can think about the fact that washing your hands is an important way of preventing infection of so many diseases, and it's not just COVID-19. So that is one. And then, like you've already mentioned in the question, dehydration also exposes us to all sorts of risk. So I'm not going to go into the details of how lack of access to clean water affects our health, but it is something that is real, and it happens at different levels. But within that slide, it was mainly about preventing infection by hand washing. So the importance of water as a way of preventing infection within the context of COVID-19, if that helps. Thank you.
So the next question for Dr.
If I may just add to what Dr. Pedi has said.
Okay.
A lot of us know that water is life, while sanitation is dignity. And when you look at it from the perspective of COVID-19, a lot of the issue that we are facing today had to do with COVID-19 and the health implications of it. And so, ordinarily, even without COVID-19, when you don't wash your hands regularly, what you see happening to you, especially for the children, is that the disease that you have on your hands you transmit it to your food. And when you eat it, you get a lot of issues with health. I'm not a health practitioner, but at least I've been dealing with the issues of sanitation, and of course, for advocacy in the area of sanitation and health, and implication, especially to women and to children. So with the COVID-19 now, the issue of sanitation has been compounded. where we don't have access to clean water. This time around, we're not just talking about water, but we're talking about clean water. And that goes down into our system. So it causes diarrhea and so many other infectious diseases. So yes, it is a critical issue that we must address when it comes to COVID-19. And that is why the emphasis is on washing of hands always, because you can transmit COVID-19 through your hands to food, and to other people through shaking. Thank you. Hands shaking.
Thank you, Doc. The next question is for Dr. Achakpa. What is the significant finding regarding the climate change correlation to the environment that women organizations have undertaken or are still undertaking at the moment? Hello, can you hear me?
I didn't know that I muted myself. I'm sorry. Women Environmental Program in my interest you that started in 1997. So we're over 20 years old as an organization. And we have worked so much in the environmental sector. I started by saying that we started as a grassroots women organization in Kaduna. And what made us to start it? The discharge of the influence by industries direct into the environment affected the women, because their source of livelihoods were on that environment, the land, the water for all types of things, the land for farming. And yet the toxic waste that was dumped there was affecting them, and they were attributing it to what? Witchcraft. So for us as an organization that we started that time, what we try to do is to take the sample of this, both the water and the soil, and we took it to the lab. And by the time the result came out, it was very alarming. And so our advocacy started from that. And since then, we have looked at it from the perspective of how is gender impacted when it comes to suffering environment. And I'm happy that Dr. Petty, when she was talking, Obani, when she was talking, she made mention about the issues of desertification. She made mention of issues of water. She made mention of several other things, from the coastal erosion to the displacement where we're having today. Last year, the flooding that occurred in some parts of the country, and I give you precisely an example from Niger State. The flooding that happened there, a family of 7 were lost. Only the man survived. The wife and the children, were killed in that flood. Why? Because the woman was trying to ensure that she gets hold of her children. While the man was found on top of the tree, he was able to climb on top of the tree. The woman was faced with how she will be able to carry her children along. The second issue is that you have a lot of crises in the country today, and Lake Chad is one of them. Most of the farming activities were conducted around Lake Chad were done by women, and the source of livelihood were on that Lake Chad. And of course, not just the issues of Lake Chad, but also the rivers around. Most of the people, the drying up of the rivers, the women have to feed, they have to take care of the children. Now, most of these rivers are dried up, and Lake Chad is also dried up. They are now faced, the men migrate, but the women are left to fend for themselves and their children. And so, even in terms of the management of the environment, the women are doing quite a lot. And of course, there is no way you can talk about environment and the issues of climate change without bringing in women into it. And that is why our organization has 5 critical areas. We are looking at the climate change. And when we look at the climate change, we are looking at the issues of adaptation. We have so much indigenous knowledge on adaptation. I'm so sorry, my line went, my internet went off. Can you hear me?
Yes, can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, ma'am.
So, women have to also trek kilometers away to look for firewood. There's no way you talk about environmental issues without linking it up to the issues of energy. And women are very good managers of energy, so they have to trade. So our organization, Women Environmental Program, is looking at all this from the perspective of how can women be integrated into policy making, into decision making, into being part of the management of the environment. So that is what we have been doing over the years. We have, like I stated, we have been able to get the first national action plan on gender and climate change in Nigeria approved by the Federal Executive Council. It is one of the very few that we have in Africa. In fact, Nigeria is like the third country or fourth country that has gotten this plan approved after the one that was approved by the UNFCCC. So Women Environmental Program is addressing some of those issues, and COVID-19 has made it even imperative that women should be even more involved when it comes to the management of the environment. Over.
Thank you, Ma, for doing justice to the question. So without wasting much time, we would like to go into the next phase of today's event that has to do with panel session. And our panelists are also seasoned environmentalists. First on the list is Dr. Blessing Ejiro Enubiwon. She is the lead HSE planning and assurance at Heritage Energy Operational Service Limited with over 18 years hands-on and leadership experience in health, safety, security, and environment in the oil and gas producing company. Blessing is a subject matter expert in strategic management and a fellow of the Nigerian Institute of Management.
You want me to talk? I see a question by generally COVID-19 has shown positive effects on climate change by decreasing movements.
Yeah, that would have been nice. We're just trying to manage time so we could go into the panel session.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Thank you, Ma. Yeah. So Dr. Blessing is a lifelong learning advocate dedicated to high performance of teams and overhauling processes for efficient operation. A lean thinker and proven expertise in organizational planning and management system implementation. She joined Heritage Energy Operational Services Limited in 2017 and have delivered world-class HSE leadership and achieved significant safety performance. Blessing is the chairperson, Women in Energy for SPE Warri, Nigeria Section 104. Dr. Blessing, you are welcome. Other panelists are?
Thank you very much.
Freeman Eloho Olowu. Freeman is a founder and center coordinator for African Center for Climate Action and Rural Development, ACAD. He has vast knowledge in the integration of environment and climate components in development and governance, multi-stakeholder negotiations in the process. Currently, he is coordinating governmental, institutional, and international efforts in the integration of climate change, and knowledge is also knowledge in water resource management, gender mainstreaming, and science knowledge deployment to sector management in Nigerian, particularly environmental governance in the Niger Delta. He is the main host to yearly Niger Delta Climate Conference and regional pre-COP meetings, Youth Climate Academy, State of Nigeria Environment, and the Capacity Building Workshop for Women in Change, Women in Climate Change Management, and United Nations Youth Event in Delta State. Freeman has a lot. He also holds an international master's in marine-based ecosystem management and climate change in 2018, diploma in law of the seas and oceans 2016, master's degree in environmental quality management 2010, and also a Bachelor of Science degree in Environment and Public Microbiology. Mr. Freeman is an environmentalist. You are welcome. Also on the list is Foluke Michael. She's a climate change advocate, project management expert, and SDG implementer. She supports entrepreneurs and social inventors with knowledge and skills needed to build sustainable business and create social impact projects. She is an MSc holder in project management from University of Salford. She obtained certificate in design lead strategy, design thinking for business strategy and entrepreneurship from Sydney, Australia. She is CEO and project director for Creative View Community Development Initiative, a non-governmental organization dedicated to the actualization of 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. In 2018, Foluke won United Nations SDG Award Innovator in Bonn, Germany at the Global Festival of Actions for Sustainable Development. She also won 2018 University of Salford Alumni Achievement Award in recognition of her exceptional contribution to the society. Just to say the least, in April 2021, Foluke launched her book, Green Entrepreneurs, 17th Business Ideas and 7 Steps to Start Your Green Business towards the success of ongoing global movement against climate crisis. Madam Foluke, you are welcome. The other panelist is Mr. Ayodeji. Ayodeji has several years of experience and leadership in sustainable material management, which he has also used to help struggling communities with material management infrastructure limitation in rural communities in the United States to promote SDG Goal 9 through development of programs and involved in designing and implementation of projects using discarded plastic bottles to build greenhouses for local farmers struggling with impact of climate condition. This also involved the design of step-by-step manual detailing the processes that can be adopted by the communities facing similar issues around the world. This project addressed 3 core pillars of sustainability: economic, social, and environment. He currently leads the Iowa State University Recycling Program and Zero Waste Effort at the recycling program. As the recycling program coordinator, he enjoys working with students on several hands-on sustainability projects, and his areas of interest lies in the working on sustainable development goals, goals 6, 9, 11, 12, 13, and 14. He is currently on the board of directors of Iowa Recycling Association as a board member. Mr. Ayodeji, you are welcome. And the last but not the least, all the way from South Africa, is Mr. Tibogo Masmela. He is an experienced environmental social governance professional with demonstrated history of working in financial sector, providing technical advisory during due diligence for the following sector, which include mining and energy, which has to do with renewable and fossil energy. He has advised on transaction with a quantum of about 1.6 billion rands. He's also experienced in investment management in the same sector that he provides due diligence service for, skilled in sustainable development, analytical skill, environmental compliance, water quality, environmental impact assessment. He is a strong community and social service professional with master degree, that's MBA, from Ross Business School. He has a bachelor degree honor from the environmental management from the University of South Africa, postgraduate diploma environmental law and governance from Stellenbosch University. Mr. Tebego, you are welcome. So without wasting much time, they're going to be our panelists, and these panelists are going to entertain questions both from what we have had and also some questions that we'll put together so that they can do justice to. And thereafter, we are going to look at other events for this virtual town hall meeting, which include a video presentation challenge that has been done, quite a number of persons have done a lot trying to put some awareness campaign with regard to the SDG and the climate change and the awareness program. So we'll open the floor for our panelists, and I'm sure they are ready to take our questions. So I can see Elo Freeman. Obani, you still be online because questions can still come to your end. So the first question goes to Mr. Ayodeji. Are the future impacts of climate change only negative? Do we expect positive impacts?
Yeah, thank you very much for that question, and good afternoon, everyone. Yes, in as much as climate change has been tagged a negative thing, I mean, I strongly believe that there are also positive impact as well. One thing I want to emphasize is that, you know, the negative impact of climate change has actually stirred up, you know, global actions and has actually drawn attention, you know, to this crisis, which is a good thing. I just want to highlight some of the positive impacts, you know, of climate change. You know, for example, on the flip side of things, the flip side of increased mortality, you know, from heat waves may be decreased, you know, when you compare that to cold waves. And also farmers in some regions might actually benefit from the earlier onset of spring and, you know, from a longer warmer season that is suitable for their growing crops. Studies have actually shown, you know, to a certain point that crops and other plants actually grow better in the presence of higher carbon dioxide levels and seems to be more drought tolerant. Of course, animals and plants could also benefit and flourish in a changing climate. One point I want to emphasize that I've not been talked a lot about is that there are potential new shipping routes, such as the Northwest Passage, which will potentially climate change could lead to that become available. And of course, energy consumption would definitely decrease due to a warmer climate condition. So those are some of the benefits, of course, but, you know, you want to weigh the pros and cons of all of this. But again, you know, we've talked about, you know, the negative impacts, but I think it's also very important for us to emphasize the positive impacts. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ayodeji. So the second question is on why is it difficult to be sure of the role of climate change in observed effects on people and ecosystem? Why is it difficult to be sure of the role of climate change and its effect on people and the ecosystem? That question is for Dr. Obani.
Thank you very much for the question. So I think it's difficult because climate change by itself is a complex problem, you know, and related to the first question, there are positive and there are negative impacts as well. Because it's going to impact on different people in different ways, you know, we can't conclude that the impacts will be positive or negative. But instead, we have to take each of those impacts and try and address them in a way that does not create even more problems. Because we also have to remember that even the solutions to climate change or the proposed solutions to climate change also have consequences. So all of this has to be taken into consideration. And it is because of this complexity, you know, that it is difficult to conclude one way or the other in terms of the impacts of climate change, you know, or in terms of the observed effects, because the effects on people and ecosystems differs from place to place, you know, and it's something that is constantly evolving. It's something that will change depending on the local context and depending on the situation. Any changes in law would have implications, any changes in the physical environment will have implications, and all of this have to be taken together as, you know, one big picture. So that big picture is very important and is often impacted by different things. So that's why it is very difficult to be sure what the role will be. But what we know, one thing we know is that the impacts are very often more negative for vulnerable and marginalized people. And that is why it is something that has to be addressed as a problem, you know, so that we do not create more difficulties for poor people, for vulnerable people, for marginalized people. Thank you.
Yeah. I believe our audience are gaining from all the questions that are being asked. Question number 3. How can global response to COVID-19 teach us about our response to climate change? I'll leave that for Foluke Michael.
Please, can you take the question again? I don't have that question.
Okay. How can global response to COVID-19 teach us about our response to climate change?
Okay, thank you everyone, and I'm so happy to join this meeting. Yeah, we about almost 2 weeks ago, April 2021, I think April 21 and 22, President Biden invited 40 global leaders. Hello? Okay, President Biden invited 40 global leaders to speak about the effects of climate change and how all leaders can come together and work collaboratively to ensure that zero carbon emission is met as maybe 2035 for UK now. The UK is looking at reduction in carbon emission by 2035 by 78%, while the US is looking at reducing by half by 2030. So I think for me, it's a positive outcome. The global leader came together to discuss this in details. I mean, ordinarily, before now, what we're all concentrating on was COVID-19, how COVID-19 could be solved, what could happen, and all the problems that are happening all around the world. But that intervention that happened about 10 days ago, it's a positive way of addressing global problems. So for us, generally, all around the world, the call to action is it's already on the table. This is not a problem that only global leaders can solve. It's a collective problem that needs intervention from all of us. Like UN will say, leave no one behind. So this current intervention has actually, if you listen to what the president of New Zealand, if I'm correct, said, she broke down what the country needed to do into 5 critical areas. And it has become their go-to question. This is what they need to achieve between now and the next 9 years. And I can see that President Biden came up and brought also his economic transformation agenda. There are 9 of them into bear that, look, this is the focus of our government. This has forced over 40 leaders to actually bring forth their agenda and what the country will achieve in the next 10 to 20 years. Now, the onus is on us. It has been spoken, it's all over in the media. What do we do as individuals in ensuring all of this can be achieved? This is where we come in. So the action, the action that they've taken is delving back to us to open the book and begin to answer one after the other, whether at school or religion organization, community leaders, or as NGO, or as research institute. We now need to divide them into implementable phases. What can we do within this community? And how do we achieve that climate crisis is nailed right from the top? For me, this is a very great development, and we're making progress, I believe. Thank you.
Maxwell, you're muted. You need to unmute. Okay. You need to unmute himself. Maxwell.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, that's okay. Question number 4. What view on the use of carbon, CO2 for enhanced oil recovery What's your view? Has this increased carbon emission in the long run with the production of more oil? Dr. Obani.
Sorry, could you take the question again, please?
What's your view on the use of captured CO2 for enhanced oil recovery? As this increases carbon emission in the long run with the production of more oil?
Well, thank you very much. I mean, that's a tricky question, and it's about this balancing, of the economic side of things and the environmental side of things. Because the thing is, you can't stop people from developing. And that's the argument that is very often brought forward. You can't stop people from developing, and especially from having access to energy, because that is essential to their ability to work. It's essential to their ability to even survive. Think about Nigeria, for instance. Without energy, we can't even as much as power the boreholes that people rely on for fresh water supply for use at home. But at the same time, if we're going to be relying on energy sources that create more problems for the environment, then we're also compromising our future. So I think the question is about reducing as much as possible the emissions. And if that means cutting down on oil consumption, we have to make that difficult choice. At the same time, we know that it can't be done drastically just because of where we sit. So it then means that we have to do it in a way that is phased, but ensure that at each point we are doing the best we can in order to minimize emissions. So climate change mitigation has to be foremost as a priority in whatever we do, while we are also doing adaptation. So we have to change the way we consume oil. We shouldn't be going for intensifying production. We should be going for reducing production. We should be going for reducing reliance on oil. And we should also be going for ways of ensuring that in the long term, we can wean ourselves from oil and possibly replace it with other sources. So renewable energy sources have to then come into the picture. So we have to just find a way of balancing, meeting our immediate needs, yes, but not meeting it in a way that further increases emissions, if that helps.
Yeah, thank you. The fifth question will be coming for Ayodeji. And I think Dr. Blessing, we're going to soon engage you, and Tobago will soon come your end. So, Ayodeji, is it possible to enforce law on planting of trees?
I think absolutely we need to do that. I mean, we all know the role tree planting plays with respect to mitigating climate change. Dr. Priscilla emphasized that in a keynote. So enforcing tree planting as a national policy and law is much more needed now than ever before, even across the broader spectrum of our country. It shouldn't even be a debate, honestly, anymore, because we know the significant roles that tree planting plays, by removing CO2 from the air, storing them, in themselves and also in the soil, and also, releasing oxygen into the atmosphere. There are enormous benefits, with respect to trees. They provide cooling shades, block cold winter winds in the northern hemisphere, where I am right now. They attract birds, wildlife, purify our air, putting the COVID-19 into perspective. They prevent soil erosion. The benefits are so enormous. So right now, it's very important, for our existence, considering COVID-19 and our health, and I strongly believe that an intentional policy, across the 3 levels of government, the national, the state, and the local government, and also including the NGOs, non-profits, profit organizations should actually embrace, and strongly encourage tree planting. And I think, the law that will actually mandate everybody to do that, should actually be put in place. And lastly, I think tree planting should actually be part of our national identity, since we are running against time to fight the climate crisis. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Blessing, are you with us? So,
yes, I'm with you.
Yeah, we're going to allow you have the floor now. I'm sure you have something for us with all that we have, all that have been said by Doc and the panelists that have spoken so far. So you can make your contributions on the floor.
Okay. My contributions on this topic is directed towards oil and gas companies, and maybe I shouldn't say oil and gas companies, because my view about climate change is that it's driven from the perspective of regulation, right? Oil and gas companies operate within a highly regulated space, and the activities of oil and gas companies is like a double bind, because the oil and gas companies in themselves, their operations are not in itself inimical to climate change, but the products are. So it gets very tricky, because it's a business decision for oil and gas companies to comply to climate change requirements, because they will tell you, oh, I'm already complying, our operations are kind of compliant to the requirements or meet some of the objectives of the SDG 13. But then they have no control, or rather their customers use more of their products. So it becomes a very tricky situation. So I feel that oil and gas companies' activities should be highly regulated, but that is not the case, because if you come to Nigeria as a country, I don't want to look at the big context now globally. I like to look at it from a local perspective. We have a lot of issues on climate change in Nigeria. Here, what are a lot of factors mitigate against us in the run towards 2030 for the meeting the SDGs? The key among them is that our regulatory framework is not entirely tight. It needs a little bit more work. Even the climate change resolution itself is not entirely, the adaptation is not complete. We have problems with mitigation strategies, we have problems with funding, and then advocacy and awareness. So it becomes a bit difficult to regulate oil and gas companies within that space. There are several, in the Nigerian context, we have lots and lots of problems. There are several factors mitigating against us. We that do not have a strong regulatory framework, neither do we have the financial capacity to drive climate change. Yes, we have put our pen to paper on several global policies, but the implementation is a problem. We have issues with pollution. Even the everyday management of pollution is a problem. What about land degradation and desertification? Desertification. We have problems with urban decay. We are urbanizing at a very unsustainable pace, right? Our coastal management is weak. We have just weak environmental governance in terms of climate change. So how do you now begin to regulate the oil and gas industry? When I was going through this, I felt, oh, this is an issue for us. But then the oil and gas industry also kind of self-regulates in the fact that they have best practices that guide the oil and gas industry. Outside regulations, you find some IOCs in those days when we had a lot of IOCs in Nigeria, they even comply to more stringent regulations than our own Nigerian regulations. But you find that as a problem because it's that practice, best practice is now almost a thing of the past. Several companies are even struggling to comply with minimum requirements. So when you begin to bring best practice from that maybe much more higher regulation, it becomes a problem. So in my opinion about bringing the climate change discourse within the oil and gas space, I think there should be a lot more coordination and collaboration by oil and gas companies. That is when they can actually come and manage the aftermath of their operations, which is mostly outside of their control, as well as their operations. During the question and answer, we're talking about CO2 for EOR. You know, that is also a business decision, and most people are driven, most companies are driven by business and they tend to forget the ethical issues in the business. All they want is more and more profit. So that's the entire climate change discourse within that sector we need to be more regulated. We need to sit down and have proper discussions on how to comply.
Thank you very much for your contributions. Thank you very much. So we're going to ask the next question. And how do we achieve carbon emission goal of net zero in Africa, given what seems like gross negligence of government and policymakers in this area, unlike in developed countries where the enforcement of carbon tax exists? Tobago Matsimela.
Thank you very much. And it's truly an honor to be part of this congregation today, to share our views and professional experiences in the field of sustainability, in particular climate change. I think it's possible to achieve it. And I think for someone who is in the industry of, the financial sector, asset management, as well as developmental finance institutions, having worked in projects in renewable mining and so forth, I think it is possible. And I think Africa needs to rely more on these developmental finance institutions, such as the African Development Bank, the CDCs of this world, the public investment corporations of this world, to actually foster, efforts to invest more in adaptation strategies in order for Africa to build more, resilience, to be able to have the ability to bounce back. I think we've seen with the current COVID pandemic that it is actually important for African or developing countries to invest more in adaptation, strategies or adaptation investments type of infrastructural development programs, in order for them to be, capacitated to be able to adapt in this current environment that we live in, and that will actually go a long way in assisting us to fight climate change. I think also you need to agree that Africa as a continent, we need to rely on our regional structures such as African Union, the SADCs of this continent, to actually develop a political will through the member states to say all of those agreements that we sign at an international level, such as the Paris Agreement, all of those targets should be communicated in those platforms to cascade down to the actual member states into the policies of those countries to say, what is it that we're going to, at a more national level, focus on? For example, Dr. Blessing was speaking about the lack of financial, help for them to be able to implement some of these projects. We need the financial sector. We need the asset management firms of this world, your Prudentials, your Ashburtons of this world, to actually align their investment strategies and mandates to those of the international agreements that we sign, such as the Paris Agreement. It would be very important, and they will actually go a long way in helping us to achieve the goal of net zero in Africa. I thank you.
Thank you very much. Very quickly, we'll look at the next question. And Freeman Eloho, I think you need to answer this. We'll be looking at your end. So what are the most critical challenges the oil and gas sector will face due to future changes in climate and variabilities and at sea level?
All right. Thank you very much. It's a great honor to be part of this meeting. So if you look at the future of energy today, you already know that hydrocarbon or fossil fuel use is going to be going down. You know? So first, you have to look at how global organizations and countries are already moving. For example, the UK has said by 2030, they are going to put a ban on hydrocarbon car uses. They were allowed to sell for 5 years, which is 2035. So if they ban 2030, which is just about 9 years from now, then in another 5 years, they were allowed to sell. So it means that at 2035, there are no more use of what? Fossil fuel in the UK. Then also in the energy transmission sector, we have seen that the global world is now looking at real transition to cleaner energy sources, solar energy and other renewable sources. So a country like Nigeria will be faced with demand. And if you look, economic transition or maybe diversification does not take one night or take a short time. We have to gradually look at it in the long run and as economy, which is oil dependent. So if you go back to the question, what will the oil industry face? Let me come home because we have to talk local because most countries, they already have alternative and they're already investing less in some of these oil facilities and activities. Looking at Nigeria, one, if there are no demands, there are no sales. Most of the oil companies we have, we agree that there are few ones that have been sold to maybe few Nigerians, indigenous investors, you know, that are being managed, for instance, Semplat and some other companies. But I tell you the truth, the real money comes from overseas. These real-time investors will stop providing money. Very soon, by 2030, we'll start seeing this kind of low investment on oil and gas. So one, the oil and gas sector will first of all see shortage of investment, cash flow, and support for drilling and investment. So you will see that there are no purchases, there are no sales. Therefore, it is difficult for you to sell. Now, putting COVID-19 in the picture, when there were fewer cars flying and the demand were very low, we saw what happened. Nigeria and other countries that were large sellers of oil had this commodity, but they couldn't sell. So they were waiting for maybe COVID period and they said they can't sell. So it means that oil and gas industry will have low patronage in the future. Also looking at climate change, it's going to increase facility maintenance. If you look at corrosion, I'm not an engineer, but looking at water research and looking at corrosion, you see that corrosion will increase. The longevity of even the facilities that you have to use, for instance, you are supposed to use for maybe like 5-10 years before you change or service, you discover that lesser than that, you need to manage them or you need to change. So it's going to increase cost for these companies, that is climate change, increase cost of facility maintenance. And it's also going to make pollution management difficult. If you look at the movement of trace metal, for instance, as temperature increases, you see that the fate, that is the movement of heavy metals, we call it most now trace metals, they move very, very fast. The aquifer, the velocity of water is actually open. So the movement of crude, for instance, will be fast. So we will see more of maybe water contamination. Even we try to clean, we'll have problem of proper cleaning for portability or for use. We'll see our farmers getting more pollution that is difficult to remediate or clean. So it also means that we are going to be seeing more of restiveness. Community are going to say, pay us more compensation, pay us for damage A, damage B. what you have actually planned that you're going to give to us is no longer sufficient because we are losing our livelihood because they can no longer farm. We have tried to do some researches in the water resources. We discovered that if you give climate change without abatement, we cannot drink most water in the coastal area. Underground aquifer pollution will increase. Agricultural farms will also be damaged. Climate change has also increased organism bioaccumulation. Food. If, for instance, you plant food, or maybe you are rearing aquaculture or open sea fishes, they bioaccumulate faster under climate change. So it means that people are going to be more restive. The oil and gas company are going to be more accountable, or they are going to demand for more. Just like Dr. Blessing said, they are weak monitoring, they are weak regulations. Now we have what we know as the CSRO, the corporate social responsibility of companies, that has to start even from the impact assessment process. But I tell you the truth, after the impact assessment to operate an oil field or to site a company in a particular location, what happens after with the post-impact assessment? How many companies visit this post-impact? What are the level of corporate social responsibility of what they have to do for the community? Alternative livelihood, conservation of biodiversity, that is all embedded in this document. So it shows that there is a strong governance problem. So increasing it with climate change, I can assure you that one, as climate change increases, there are alternative development of use for either transport or for other uses, which is going to lower the demand. The community where this thing is being operated are going to demand for more social responsibility that this company might not be able to meet. The cost of facility maintenance will shoot up, which some of these companies will not be able to meet up with, because the real investors must have left them. Because if you look at Nigeria, for example, we have not actually invested in technology and infrastructural development in this oil and gas, wherein you see open gas flaring everywhere. Technology, for instance, in Norway, wherein oil depot, you can find aquaculture farm to check the slightest pollution in order to say, okay, this place is contaminated. We don't have it in Nigeria. Our government has kept taking money. Our regulators have become so compromised. So putting all these things together, I tell you the truth, the industry is at an edge, and climate change is going to drive poverty and going to take some of this company off operation, off use. It's just a matter of time. Thank you for now.
Thank you very much, Freeman Eloho. You've really done justice to the topic, and you've done justice to the question. Because of our constraint of time, the last question and not the least will go to Tobago Mesimela. We enjoy all the time, and also we've all learned from our panelists. Mr. Tobago, what triggers climate change impacts more? A changing climate or changing non-climatic factors?
Thank you very much, Maxwell. I think it's important to agree and to take, responsibility as human beings that we are, the major cause of climate change in the, on this planet. But I think what is important is to say, yes, we agree that we are solely to be blamed, because most of the activities that we embark on, it's mainly to develop our countries, but I think in ensuring that, we limit the type of actions or activities that actually upset the planet, that cause climate change. I think it's about time that we actually don't discuss about what causes climate change, but we say, how do we transit to an environment where we no longer become the contributors to climate change, but we contribute into transiting, Africa into a green economy, where we focus on greening the economy more, because we are much aware, that the message is out there in relation to deforestation, in relation to increasing, intensive agricultural methods that, emit nitrous oxide into the atmosphere, which then causes climate change. Those are actions that we are all aware of. But I think in changing the narrative, it's important that platforms such as the SPE, we change the narrative and drive the narrative of saying, how do we help South Africa and other, member states within the continent to transit to a low carbon economy, and start asking the questions around What do we need to do to get finance? What do we need to do to be able to drive, the adaptation strategies, build the resilience that the continent needs? Because to be honest with you, we are a developing continent, and we still need to embark on activities that actually develop an economy. And if we don't come up with mechanics that are going to help us to transit into a greener economy, we are still going to pollute, because ultimately we want to develop. And which is why Europe, or the first world, if you look at them, they are more advanced on this carbon tax issues, carbon tax laws, simply because they are developed, but we are still developing. But we cannot continue to pollute because we are not developed. Let's rather find ways in which we can also develop, but developing in a more greener way. I'll stop at that for now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our panelists have really done justice to the topic. And because of time constraint, we will want to end the questions at this point. We would like to look at a video challenge, and just to keep us in the loop, we actually have a lot on the table, but we are constrained. Therefore, the syndicate session as planned will no longer hold. And this is because our panelists has actually done justice already to the topic. What more can we say? When we have a professor speaking, a doctor speaking, and academic researcher speaking, and all the environmentalists have done justice to the topic. Thank you very much for honoring our invitation, and thank you for all that you have said. Can we put a round of applause for all our panelists? Let's unmute and give them a round of applause. So without wasting much time, Simeon, you can put up the video challenge. Let's just have it as an appetizer moment.
Okay, so just quickly, okay. Moderator, special thanks, because maybe some of our panelists or speakers may leave, but we'll urge them to wait. I think it won't take too much time, but I will just use the opportunity to thank them. They have really done a lot. What we will do also is that on our LinkedIn page, on our social media page, especially the LinkedIn, we will put some of the remaining questions there, and we'll tag our resource people. We enjoin you to look for section 103. You just put SPE Port Harcourt in LinkedIn. If you put it, and then you can see, and maybe we can further the discourse, and who knows, maybe we can get something worthy out of this. And since we have our environmentalists here, and we can always pass it through them and see where it could form part of the actions. And of course, where policy people and so on and so forth could also see to make things better. So thank you so much, resource people. We really appreciate. Thank you.
Or the video challenge.
Hello, I am Justice. I'm here to tell you about SPE and SDG 13. SDG 13, which is climate change, is a real threat to our entire civilization for zero carbon emissions. This is done through her industrial activities, programs, and events. Target 3, Target 13B. Through collaboration and association, SPE ensures plans are in place to sustain the process. I hope you now see how SPE is promoting SDG 13 by creating awareness and implementing policies. Kindly reach me here. Thank you. Hello, I am Justice.
Our world has been devastated by hurricanes, earthquakes, floods, and droughts.
This is caused by climate change.
Climate change could destroy the world that we live in. We can prevent this if we all work together. There is still time for us to save our world. Things that we can be doing. Things that you and your family can do together. You can reduce the amount of waste you produce. Many items that you use can be recycled. Cans, bottles, paper, even electrical goods and food can be recycled. Plant a tree in your garden and watch it grow. What we have right now is a chance to preserve our future. Tell your parents, your grandparents and your friends to do the small things that count. We must take it step by step to make sure that you have a future to grow up in. Our world has been devastated by hurricanes.
Hello there. I'm Mother Earth. I want to tell you about climate change. Climate change is a long-term shift in global or regional climate patterns. Often climate change refers specifically to the rise in global temperatures.
Every time you turn on the light, the computer, the microwave, or even a shower, you are consuming energy. This energy is produced largely by burning gases, coal, or petroleum, which are known as fossil fuels.
Those are the main causes of climate change. What can we do to reduce or stop this? Reduce, reuse, recycle. Plant more trees. Reduce energy consumption. Reduce the emission of CO2. Society of Petroleum Engineers help by sensitizing the little children through energy for me campaigns, recycling advocacy programs, technical lectures on how to reduce the effects of climate change. Earth is our home. Take responsibility.
Good afternoon, everyone. So we just showed a slideshow of a few of our video challenges. We had a lot of people sending their videos. You can check our social media pages to see more of the videos. So now I'm going to announce our winners. Sadly, we can't give everyone a prize. So for the first 5 positions, I'm going to start from the 5th position. So 5th position, we have Ishola Oluwapelumi. I don't know if any of the winners are on the call with us. 5th place, we have Ishola Oluwapelumi. For the 4th place, we have Owolabi Ololade Nathaniel. 3rd position, we have Tarigogo Iwi Awoi Kaige. I hope I pronounced that. Please bear with me. 2nd place, we have Mercy Ashiwe. And for 1st position, we have Ungu Daniel Ayomide. Are any of our winners on the call with us? You all did amazing. Anyone who submitted a video, you did great. I enjoyed watching the videos and just want to encourage all of you to participate in any other competition SPE has, and you're all winners in your own way. Yeah, I'm seeing some of the winners identifying themselves. That's good. Well, thank you for taking part in the competition.
So it's sure you see the criteria that were used to evaluate the winners. The number of likes, comments were summed up together, and that gives the winner. Thank you. I think membership chair.
Okay.
Membership chair.
We can just put the link, the membership link in the, if you have the link, just put it there. And then you just scroll through this if you don't have someone, the membership people here. But basically, it's just for non-members to, if they want to be part of SPE, they can click the link and submit the information, and they will get back to them as soon as possible. For those that needs to renew also, it's the same. So if the link is available, just you need to drop the link there for people to click. Simeon, you can run through the forthcoming event, Simeon.
Photograph.
Very quickly.
Okay, we would like to take a quick photograph of everyone. So if you can just put on your camera for a few seconds and smile, as if you're in a comfortable place, very helpful. So let's take a quick photograph. So yes. Anyone available, just put on your cameras. I'll see you a little. Let me put my own, I guess.
How many more seconds? They're telling us so we can't be smiling forever. I'm going to do some more seconds.
Sorry.
Some of us don't used to smile
everybody,
too much.
Just the people that are showing. Sorry. Please don't get tired of smiling. I don't know. I think because my sister, yeah. I'm not getting the full view of everybody.
Simeon is taking it. Simeon, are you there?
Yeah.
Simeon is taking the pictures here.
Okay.
Okay, we are good.
Okay. Anita,
Okay.
we are good.
Thank you.
So, vote of, I'll move to the next item, vote of thanks. Anita?
Okay, we've spent a lovely about 2 hours together. I want to thank everyone from our panelists, our chairman, everybody who was able to make this program a success, including our participants. This program would not have been a success without you. So we thank you all for making our time to attend this program. We hope that you keep joining us. We have many more amazing programs slated for this year. And please, if you're not a registered SPE section 103 member or SPE member at all, just click the link in the chat box and we'll reach out to you. For the winners, we're also going to reach out to you privately. Thank you all for participating. You've made this event memorable. So you have a nice day. Thank you all.
Okay, thank you so much, the SDG committee. Well done.
Thank you, sir.
Well done. So as you can see, thank you so much. Thanks to our distinguished panelists and speakers. They are wonderful. We have to continue this on LinkedIn, Maxwell. This has to continue on LinkedIn.
Okay.
It's amazing.
Thank you. Yeah.